The evening air was heavy with rain, the kind that makes every sound sharper and every shadow darker. I had left work a little later than usual, hoping to sneak in some quiet time before reaching home, but the traffic had already started building. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, and the windshield wipers moved rhythmically, trying to keep pace with the downpour. Everything felt normal until my car shuddered, a deep groan rising from the engine that immediately set my heart racing. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the slick road. Staring at the dashboard, lights blinking like tiny alarms of panic. I stepped out, feeling the rain soak through my light jacket almost instantly. The car was coughing and sputtering, refusing to start again. Alone, soaked, and anxious, I felt a flicker of frustration not at the car, but at the mounting tension in my life. My marriage had been quietly slipping into something gray and routine. There was comfort, yes, but comfort came at the price of excitement, intimacy, and connection. And at that moment, standing in the rain, all I could notice was the hollow absence of those things. Then he appeared. Out of nowhere, a man approached under the dim glow of the streetlight. He wore a simple, worn jacket, his hands already knowing the familiar movements of a mechanic. The way he moved, confident, calm, collected, made the rain seem lighter somehow. I blinked, momentarily forgetting the chill and the wetness. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice smooth, steady, carrying a tone of kindness I hadn't realized I missed. He crouched by the hood, examining the engine with practiced hands. I watched him, noticing the way he worked methodically yet with care, as if he wasn't just fixing a machine but restoring a small piece of order in a chaotic world. When he looked up at me, his eyes were warm, attentive, a subtle smile playing at the corner of his lips. I almost expected him to ask about my day, to really ask, and I realized just how long it had been since anyone had done that at home. My husband was tired, busy, distracted, but here was a stranger who seemed genuinely interested. I found myself talking without thinking, telling him small things about why I had been driving late, laughing at my own frustration. He listened, nodding, making small observations, yet never intruding. The sound of the rain, the hum of the tires on the wet street, and his calm presence created a strange intimacy I didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Every small detail he attended to, checking the oil, inspecting the belts, listening to the engine's complaints, became a reminder of what had been missing at home. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, just attention, presence, and genuine care. I realized how rare that feeling was. At home, I often felt invisible, a part of the furniture rather than the heart of a partnership. My husband loved me, yes, in ways that were safe and steady, but he didn't notice the small cracks in our connection. He didn't notice my exhaustion, my quiet struggles, the little victories of the day. And here, under a dim streetlight in the rain, a man I barely knew made me feel seen, if only for a few fleeting moments. When he finally closed the hood, the car purred like it had never had a problem. I felt a wave of relief and something else, a pang of unexpected longing. I handed him the cash, barely able to meet his eyes. He nodded, polite, professional. Yet there was an unspoken understanding, as if he knew the impact of his small attentions. I drove away slowly, the rain still falling, and noticed his figure receding into the night. My car was fixed, yes, but something deeper had shifted inside me. The drive home was quiet, filled with reflections I hadn't allowed myself to explore. The streets blurred past, lights streaking like memories I hadn't quite faced. I thought of my husband, tired and distracted at home, and of the little details I had stopped noticing. The conversations we no longer had, the silences that had grown between us. And I realized, with a mixture of guilt and clarity, that the mechanic had done more than fix my car. He had held up a mirror, showing me what was missing at home, the warmth, attention, and care that I had been craving without even realizing it. By the time I reached my driveway, I was drenched in more than just rain. There was an ache of longing, a spark of self-awareness, and a quiet sense that something in my life needed attention. I parked the car and watched the droplets slide down the windshield, thinking of the man in the rain and the fragile, neglected connections waiting for me at home. Tonight, I had been reminded of what I had been missing, and it was impossible to ignore. Driving home, The city lights blurred into streaks, reflecting in the puddles and my own thoughts. Every red light seemed longer than the last, as if the universe was giving me time to reflect, forcing me to sit with feelings I had tucked away for years. My car hummed smoothly beneath me, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts raging in my mind. The mechanic's calm presence lingered like a ghost, making every interaction I had at home feel hollow and absent in comparison. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, quiet. The hum of the heater, the faint ticking of the wall clock, these familiar sounds should have brought comfort, but they felt foreign now. I stepped inside, shedding my wet jacket, and was immediately hit by the usual ordinariness of domestic life. The dinner dishes from last night still sat in the sink. A stray sock lay crumpled near the couch. My husband was nowhere to be seen, likely working late or lost in whatever project occupied his mind. I hung my keys and paused, realizing how little I noticed these small details before, how little I cared to notice. I wandered into the living room, feeling a strange tension coil around my chest. The emptiness of the space mirrored the emptiness I sometimes felt in our relationship. There was no warmth, no spark of attention waiting for me. Only the routines, the responsibilities, and the quiet, predictable life we had built together. And in that predictability, I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly noticed, truly seen. I poured myself a glass of water and sank into the couch, staring at the muted glow of the television. Memories of the mechanic's hands on my car, the soft attentiveness in his voice, the way he had looked at me as though I mattered, they played over and over in my mind like a persistent song. My chest tightened with longing, not just for him, but for the feelings he had awakened in me, the reminder of something I had let slip away at home. It wasn't about the car. It was about presence, attention, and connection, things that had become rare in my marriage. My husband loved me, yes, but love had become a routine, predictable gestures, and shared responsibilities without real emotional engagement. I remembered small conversations we used to have, the laughter, the late-night talks, the subtle touches of affection that used to feel alive. Where had that gone? And more importantly, why hadn't I noticed its absence until now? The phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from my husband. "Running late. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of annoyance and sadness. He had no idea how alone I felt in our shared life. The message was casual, almost dismissive, and yet it was a mirror of the emotional distance that had grown between us. I typed a reply, but deleted it before sending, realizing that words could not bridge the gap that had silently widened over the years. I went to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked street. The mechanic's figure lingered in my mind like a shadow, and a strange thought crept in. What if life had shown me a glimpse of something I had been missing all along? I knew I couldn't act on it, not practically, not morally, but the awareness alone was unsettling. My heart ached for the attention, the care, the genuine interest that had been missing in my daily life. The contrast between him and my husband was painfully clear. Hours passed, the house remaining silent. I tried to focus on mundane tasks, folding laundry, straightening the living room, but my mind kept drifting back. The ache of longing, the questions, the sudden realization of emotional neglect at home, it was all-consuming. I felt torn between gratitude and guilt. Gratitude for the reminder of what it felt like to be noticed, and guilt for comparing it to the person who had been my partner for years. By the time my husband walked in, tired and distracted, I was quiet, distant. He kissed my cheek, asked how my day went, and I gave a polite but hollow response. He noticed nothing, the tension, the unrest, the new awareness that had taken root in me. And in that moment, I realized just how invisible I had become to him, how easy it had been for my emotional needs to go unmet. Later that night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. My thoughts circled endlessly. The mechanic, my husband, my own dissatisfaction, the life I had taken for granted. I wondered, for the first time in years, what it would be like to feel truly seen every day, to have someone notice the little things that mattered, to be valued not for what I did, but simply for who I was. And then a question settled deep in my mind, one I couldn't shake. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you confront the absence at home, or let it linger, hoping it would somehow repair itself? Please tell me in the comments. I love to read your thoughts. The rain finally stopped, leaving the night quiet and heavy with reflection. I closed my eyes, knowing that the next steps I took in my marriage, in my own understanding of happiness, would define the rest of my life. But for now, I had no answers, only questions, and the echo of a stranger who reminded me of what I had been missing. The following week passed in a blur of routine, but the quiet moments at home became heavier than ever. Every glance at the empty spaces on the couch, every passing glance at my husband absorbed in his phone or laptop, reminded me of the emotional chasm that had grown between us. I tried to push the mechanic from my mind, telling myself it was just a fleeting distraction, a spark that didn't belong in my life. But the memory of his attention, his presence, refused to fade. It started innocuously, a simple coincidence that brought me back to his workshop. My car needed a minor adjustment, something I could have done anywhere, but I found myself driving to his garage without a clear reason. The streets leading there were familiar, yet they felt different now, charged with anticipation and curiosity. Every turn of the wheel was measured, almost hesitant, as though I was testing my own courage to face whatever emotions might arise. When I arrived, the mechanic looked up from under the hood, wiping his hands with a rag. His smile was the same calm, steady one that had unsettled me the first day we met. "Back so soon?" he asked, and the casual tone sent a strange warmth through my chest. I tried to respond lightly, but my voice sounded tight, unfamiliar even to me. I realized, in that moment, how rare it had been for someone to notice me with genuine interest lately. As he worked on the car, I found myself watching him, noting the careful way he handled the tools, the small laugh lines around his eyes that revealed both years of experience and kindness. He talked about mundane things, the weather, a car he was fixing, a neighbor he'd helped last week, but I noticed how his attention to detail, even in these small conversations, made me feel valued. His focus wasn't just on the task, it was on the moment, on connecting. I told myself it was harmless, just a moment of human connection I had been starving for. But as he handed me the keys after finishing, our hands brushed. It was brief, accidental even, yet my heart jumped in a way it hadn't in years. I stepped back, taking the keys, and forced a smile. "Thanks. Really. You always seem to know what's wrong before I even say anything." My words sounded more like a confession than I intended. He nodded, and there was a pause, a quiet wait between us. I felt a pull, a question in the air, unspoken but undeniable. But before anything could unfold, I turned, stepping toward my car, driving away with a mind buzzing with thoughts and emotions I wasn't ready to confront. The streetlights blurred. The engines hum, a reminder of the life I was returning to, a life that felt increasingly out of reach in terms of fulfillment. Back home, the emptiness felt sharper. I watched my husband move through the house, his attention on work or a show, entirely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I realized that the sense of neglect, the unnoticed presence, wasn't just about romantic attention, it was about emotional acknowledgement, about being seen as a whole person rather than just a routine fixture in someone else's life. Later that night, while lying in bed, I caught myself thinking about him again, the mechanic, the stranger who had reminded me of something I had forgotten about myself. My hands ached for connection, for a spark of intimacy, even if only emotional. And yet, guilt weighed heavily on me, a constant reminder that these feelings, while real, were directed toward someone who wasn't my husband. I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made in life, the compromises, the patience I had given in the name of love and marriage. Where had it led me? To a quiet, predictable home where presence was measured in physical proximity rather than genuine attention, where laughter and curiosity were replaced by routines and responsibilities. The contrast between that and the brief moments of engagement I felt with the mechanic was impossible to ignore. As days turned into a week, small interactions with him became anchors of awareness for me. I noticed the absence of meaningful gestures at home, the way my husband never asked about my day, never paused to notice small changes or effort, and I realized that these small absences, accumulated over years, had created a void that a single, attentive stranger could make painfully apparent. It wasn't love. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But it was a reminder of human needs I had neglected in myself, the craving for attention, for recognition, for acknowledgement that I mattered. I felt a strange mixture of gratitude and frustration for seeing what I had been missing and for realizing how long I had gone without it. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, asking the same question that had haunted me before. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you address the gap at home or let it continue until it consumed you? Please tell me in the comments. I love to read your thoughts. And as sleep finally approached, uneasy and restless, I knew that the next encounters, the next moments of reflection, would challenge me in ways I wasn't yet ready to face. The storm inside was just beginning, and the decisions ahead would test not just my heart, but my sense of self, my priorities, and my courage. The days following my visit to the mechanic's workshop seemed ordinary on the surface, but beneath that facade, something had shifted. Every routine task at home, making breakfast, doing laundry, even walking the dog felt heavy, weighted with the awareness of what was missing. My mind kept drifting to him, the way he had made me feel alive in small, ordinary moments, and the contrast with the hollow familiarity of my home life gnawed at me relentlessly. It wasn't long before I found myself making excuses to return to the garage. Sometimes it was the car, sometimes it was merely curiosity disguised as necessity, and each visit, each exchange, seemed to pull me further into uncharted territory. I told myself it was harmless, just human connection I'd been deprived of for too long. But I also knew that these feelings, subtle and innocent at first, had started crossing invisible lines I wasn't prepared to acknowledge. One afternoon, as I sat in the waiting area sipping lukewarm coffee, he appeared with a small, friendly smile, wiping grease off his hands. "Thought I'd check on how the car's running," he said casually, but his presence made my pulse spike unexpectedly. I smiled, a little forced, and tried to focus on the mundane chatter. Yet, every glance, every shared laugh, felt like a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. "You know," he said quietly, almost as if admitting it to himself, "it's nice to see someone enjoying something as simple as a smooth ride. People forget the little joys sometimes." His words lingered, brushing against something raw inside me, something I had buried under years of marital compromise and unspoken grievances. I nodded, aware that the statement was deeper than the casual tone suggested. Driving home, my thoughts were chaotic. I knew that the comfort, the attention, the acknowledgement I was craving was something my husband hadn't provided in years. It wasn't about material neglect, or even the absence of intimacy alone. It was the lack of emotional presence, the indifference that had become the norm. And now, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't ignore how alive I felt with someone who didn't demand, criticize, or overlook me. That night, a quiet unease settled over me. I wanted to talk to my husband, to express the loneliness and the yearning that had grown silently between us, but I couldn't find the courage. Words felt insufficient, inadequate against years of neglect. And yet, the more I tried to rationalize my feelings for the mechanic as fleeting, the more they anchored themselves in my heart, stubborn and unyielding. Then came the unexpected, a small invitation that should have felt innocent, but rattled me more than I expected. He asked if I wanted to join him for a walk while he tested a car repair on a longer stretch outside town. It was meant to be practical, almost mundane, yet every part of me recognized the subtext, the subtle pull towards something forbidden. My instincts screamed caution, but my heart, weary and neglected, whispered a dangerous curiosity. I hesitated, aware that agreeing would cross a line I had not intended to approach. And yet, I said yes. Perhaps it was bravery, perhaps it was recklessness, but the truth was simpler. I wanted to feel seen again, to reclaim a sense of attention and worth that had been missing for far too long. The drive was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the engine and the occasional glance at the passing scenery. We spoke, yes. But it was different, less about tasks, more about small confessions, stories from our past, subtle truths that made the moments feel intimate. And as he laughed at something I said, something in my chest loosened, a relief mingled with guilt. I was aware of every pulse, every breath, aware of the complexity of what was unfolding, yet unable to stop it. By the time we returned, I felt lighter, yes, but also more conflicted than ever. I realized that these encounters, seemingly innocuous, were shaping me, challenging my sense of loyalty and self-perception. At home, the contrast was staggering. My husband remained distant, wrapped in his own world, entirely unaware of the storm I carried silently. That night, I lay awake, reflecting on the choices I had made and the choices I might be compelled to make. The line between attention and temptation, between connection and betrayal, had never felt so blurred. And I found myself asking, once again, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you ignore the void at home or confront it before it consumes you entirely? Please tell me in the comments. I love to read your thoughts. Sleep came fitfully, a restless mixture of longing, guilt, and a quiet awareness that life as I knew it was about to change. The days ahead promised tension, decisions, and revelations I wasn't yet prepared to face, yet I knew that avoiding them was no longer an option. The storm had begun, and the consequences of emotional neglect, curiosity, and human longing were only just starting to unfold. The tension in my home had grown palpable over the past few days, like the air just before a storm breaks. Every glance from my husband, every casual remark, felt heavier now, laced with a weight I could no longer ignore. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. The emotional distance that had always existed now gaped like an open wound. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The black mechanic, with his simple honesty, his easy laughter, had become the mirror reflecting what I had lost, what I had been craving. That evening, after returning from the garage again, I found my husband sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. The familiarity of the scene, once comforting, now felt suffocating. I sank into the armchair opposite him, my chest tight, my mind racing. Words, raw and unfiltered, clawed at the back of my throat. How could I tell him that I felt neglected, lonely, and emotionally invisible? How could I confess that someone else had managed to make me feel alive again, even if just for fleeting moments? "Can we talk?" I asked finally, my voice shaking slightly. He looked up, eyes tired, expression neutral. "About what?" he replied casually, unaware of the gravity I carried. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage I didn't know I had. "I feel invisible," I began, fumbling over the words. "I feel like I'm here, but I'm not really seen. And it's been this way for a long time. I've been lonely, even when I'm with you." He frowned slightly, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. "I don't know what you mean. I've been providing for us, haven't I?" he said, the tone more irritated than concerned. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand that love isn't measured in dollars or doing the routine chores. It's in attention, care, presence. But instead, I swallowed the frustration, my heart aching with a mixture of guilt and longing. "I know you provide," I whispered, "but I need more than that. I need to feel valued, wanted, and seen." My voice cracked, tears threatening to fall. I could see him struggling to process, and part of me felt relief. At least I had said it aloud, even if it was met with confusion. The days that followed were tense. My interactions with my husband were polite, distant, and filled with unspoken words, while my visits to the garage became my only emotional refuge. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of connection with the mechanic highlighted what I had been missing at home. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time, a dangerous combination that left me dizzy and unsure. Then, the unexpected happened. He, the mechanic, reached out, suggesting a longer drive to test a newly repaired vehicle. My heart raced, but I knew accepting would cross boundaries I couldn't easily return from. Yet, my soul, hungry for recognition, for acknowledgement, whispered a temptation I couldn't resist. I agreed. The drive was quiet, intimate in a way that left my thoughts swirling. We spoke about our dreams, small confessions, pieces of our pasts we had never shared with anyone. It was intoxicating, a forbidden connection that reminded me of the life and attention I had been starved of. I knew it was dangerous, but for once, danger felt alive. As we returned, a sudden clarity struck me. I realized that the life I had known, polite dinners, quiet evenings, the routine of familiarity, was no longer enough. My heart had awakened to the possibility of being truly seen, understood, and appreciated. But awakening came with a cost: guilt, uncertainty, and the looming question of how much I could allow myself to be drawn toward something forbidden. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning. I had choices to make, decisions that could redefine my life or destroy it. The line between right and wrong blurred, and I felt the weight of every unspoken emotion, every unmet need, pressing down on me. And in that quiet, the question returned: if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you confront the void at home, or follow the lure of connection and acknowledgement elsewhere? Please tell me in the comments. I love to read your thoughts. Morning came, and with it, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I knew that ignoring the truth, pretending that nothing had changed, was no longer an option. Life demanded honesty, courage, and a reckoning with the reality I had avoided for so long. But even as I prepared to face the day, a shadow of fear lingered, the fear of consequences, of judgment, of the heartbreak that could follow. And yet, deep down, I also felt hope. Hope that recognizing my own needs, honoring my own heart, could lead to something authentic, something real. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous even, but the first step had been taken. I had acknowledged my longing, my pain, and my desire to be seen. And sometimes, simply admitting the truth is the hardest and the most courageous act of all.